The following is a paid program and does not necessarily reflect the opinions of the staff or management of Visionary-related entertainment.
Aloha and welcome to Maui Nonprofit Notes. Each week on this show, you'll find us talking story with Maui's nonprofit executive directors and staff to find out how they're working to support those with needs within our community. Maui Nonprofit Notes is generously sponsored by Pacific Source. If you're building or remodeling a home, please stop by Pacific Source's Cabinet and Appliance Showroom, located in the Waikapu Base Yard. I'm Susie Tiemann, Executive Director of Lokahi Pacific, and your host for Maui Nonprofit Notes. During this hour, we share some of the experiences of our nonprofit agencies and just how they're changing lives, changing communities, and creating miracles of hope for those with needs. Today, we're going to be talking with two more member agencies. We've got Michelle Liberty, who's the Maui County Director for the Red Cross, and we've got Danny Riggs, who's the Clinical Director for Child and Family Services Maui. Hi, y'all.
Hi.
Hello.
How you doing today? I never asked which one of you wanted to go first.
He does.
Oh,
Well, that was the shortest fight in radio history.
but it was clear.
Yes, decisive win. Okay, so we're going to start off with Child and Family Services. Danny, I know you've been on the show a few times, and we've always learned a lot because I think most of the time we tend to go into the bullying and, of course, the sexual harassment. And I know that this is, what is it, sexual...
It turns out that I don't know how you timed it this way, Susie, but you always call me right before Domestic Violence Awareness Month, which is in October, and you always call right before Sex Assault Awareness Month, which is April. So April has a dual role. It is both Child Abuse and Neglect Month, so it is the month of the child, and it's also Sexual Assault Awareness Month. And I know you out on the air can't see this, but the color for Sex Assault Awareness Month is teal. And if you saw Susie's blouse, you would know that she dressed for the occasion.
that doesn't make me the poster child for it or anything, does it?
We don't know.
Oh, that's well done.
We haven't had that talk. So.
Very well done, Danny. So obviously, if this is a special month, you've got some special situations and occasions and events happening. You want to start out with that, or you want to give us a little bit of background on what's happening in that area in Maui?
Well, so Child and Family Services is a big nonprofit statewide, and we do a lot of different things here on Maui. And we focus here primarily in the areas of child abuse and neglect, sexual assault, and some work in domestic violence. We're also doing a lot of interesting work these days, piloting an anti-poverty program as well. So we have a pretty broad base of things that we do, but we do have the Maui Sexual Assault Center, which is really the rape crisis center for Maui County. So it includes Molokai and Lanai as well. And in that program, we do a lot of things. We do prevention and education work. We reach out into the schools and provide educational opportunities all the way from preschool. We'll talk more later about how we're going to be moving into the high schools in some different ways. We also have crisis intervention work, and then we also have a long-term therapy for victims of sexual assault. We work very closely with the Maui Police Department. We work with the prosecutor's office and their Office of Victim Witness. So it really is an interagency collaboration to provide the best services possible for our survivors of sexual assault.
It's one of the things that we don't hear a lot about. I mean, this is happening all the time.
Yes.
But
we don't like to talk about sex. People don't, it's an uncomfortable topic, If you ask people if they'd like to talk about money, their budgets, or their sex lives, they're probably going to talk to you about their budgets.
Gotcha.
and as uncomfortable as money makes us, it's still easier to talk about than...
Right. But we do, I mean, it's almost like it has to be something outrageous or more outrageous than just sexual assault that makes a case worth any notoriety.
It's true, and it's sad because our statistics these days show that somewhere between 1 in 4 and 1 in 6 women will be sexually assaulted at some point in their lives. And the statistics for men keep dropping. A few years ago, they thought it was 1 in 25, and then it went to 1 in 19. And now we're looking at probably it's somewhere between 1 in 9 and 1 in 12 men. So
My gosh.
we start looking at those kinds of numbers. And that's not even when we start talking about populations like our transgender youth, where the statistics start to go through the roof. So it really is a problem that is everybody's problem.
Boy, it sounds like it. So that 1 in 6, 1 in 9, and then throw in the transgendered factor, and it doubles.
Yeah.
That's scary. Well, why don't we have any? I mean, why aren't we hearing more about it? I mean, I understand what you're saying, and I understand we don't talk about it much, but why not? I mean, do parents talk with their kids about it?
I think people are uncomfortable with it. I mean, people are uncomfortable just even doing the basic talk. And I think it's one of the things we're trying to do at Child and Family Service and with our Maui Sexual Assault Center. We go into elementary schools. We go into preschools and do good touch, bad touch. This is my body. This is my boundary. Kinds of talks with our youngest kids so that they begin to grow up knowing what the boundaries are and knowing what's safe for them, knowing what to do if somebody does start to assault you.
Right.
Knowing to go to a responsible adult and start to talk. And if that adult doesn't respond, go to the next one.
I see. Okay. Yeah.
So we're working more and more all the time to build that awareness. And I will give the legislature credit. They are trying to do some things to make things better for our sex assault victims. There's a big initiative and a big push right now. Money was allocated by the legislature, the Attorney General's office, and a number of us who work in this area are working to get the backlog or older sex assault kits tested. So it's not that it's not happening, but there's a long ways to go.
I remember reading about how many years back these kits go.
Yeah.
I mean, that was there more to that story?
Well, it's interesting because there certainly are jurisdictions across the country where sexual assault kits have been treated, and sex assault cases have been mistreated a great deal. I don't believe that's true for us here in Hawaii. I think what's happened is that the criteria for testing kits has changed dramatically. So it used to be that you tested a kit if it had probative value. Okay, what that means is if it was going to help you solve the case, then you tested the kit. But the criteria, as our science has evolved and DNA science has evolved, and now the FBI has something called CODIS. And it's a big computer database of DNA material. So now the criteria has shifted so that you want to test a kit to upload it into CODIS to see if maybe you've got a serial rapist that's done offenses somewhere else. So the criteria has changed a lot, and we're, as a state, I wouldn't say we were on the first wave in the set, but we're on the second wave in the set, and it's we're really working to bring ourselves in line with the new standards.
I see. Okay, so that hopefully anything new that comes up, if it's in CODIS, they've got an answer quickly.
Right.
I got you. Okay. That just it seems strange. Now, not every case is prosecuted, right?
Some people don't want to report to the police at all, and you can always receive services without reporting to the police. You can even have a forensic exam done and not have it police reported. So there's that category. There are a number of cases where the person, for any number of reasons, might decide to withdraw their case. going all the way through a sexual assault case, through trial and all of that, is a very, very difficult thing to do. It has its challenges. So there are any number of reasons why someone might withdraw a case and it won't go to prosecution. And then there's always the challenge, the prosecutor actually has to look at the evidence and see if there is enough to warrant going to trial.
So the statistics that you're reporting, does that take into consideration each of these categories that you're talking about, or is it looking at it as a whole?
It's looking at it, so if we look at the entire population of women in the United States, it's somewhere between 1 in 4 and 1 in 6 women have been sexually assaulted. Yeah.
Wow. So if there's, do we have many situations where it's one of many, there's somebody out there doing all this? If they can be tied to one person, does it get more attention than if they're just random?
Yes. Yeah, and you've got a better case.
Right.
You've got more evidence. You maybe one case you don't have good DNA, another one you do. So if you can link these things, and it also means, of course, serial sex assault offenders have a number of victims. So if you stop somebody, you just prevented a whole lot of sexual assault, right?
Right.
So it does really make a difference, and it's important that we really remove the serial rapists from the scene.
I find it interesting. You mentioned a little bit ago about working with younger kids or children. You were talking something about kindergarten or early 1, 2.
We go into preschools and do good touch, bad. It's basically a good touch, bad touch type of criteria where you learn. They have some cute little songs and some fun little parts, but this is my body. This is safe. Who gets to touch your bathing suit areas? Just real basic stuff, but it's important stuff for children to know so that they can feel safe. Our biggest push at this point in terms of prevention and education is really trying to reach out to the junior high school and high school age students. And with Sex Assault Awareness Month coming up, in fact, we're going to be at Quincahamano Mall on the 5th in the afternoon, when kids do what? Go to the mall, right? They hang out at the mall. And we're going to have games and events. We're going to have a number of very interactive things for the kids to do. These young folks that are in that transition from childhood to adulthood. We're going to have a number of activities for them to do, looking at the impact of alcohol on sexual assault, looking at what is consent.
Right.
What yes means yes, and that's the only thing that means yes.
That doesn't mean yes.
Yes. And no certainly doesn't mean yes. And,
Correct.
And there's actually a very cute little wonderful video we're going to work with on shave ice. So if I offer you a shave ice and you go, no, I don't want a shave ice, that means no, right? And if I offer you a shave ice and you say, well, maybe later, that means maybe later. And if I offer you and I say, I have this really wonderful shave ice, and wouldn't you just really thoroughly enjoy it and love it? And you say yes, and that means yes. It's really well done. It's done far better than I can do it over the radio, but it's really well done. So we're going to have some really fun activities for the kids to get involved in and sort of target these areas. Another big question for our teens is safe dating. How do we begin to educate our children about safety and what's safe, what's not, what's partner violence in a dating situation. And all of these things are very real for our teenagers. But again, like you were saying before, they're not really things we talk about enough.
Right.
There's no class in that, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah,
well, I'd hate to be a teenager today.
It's really,
It's a tough one.
Yeah, the challenges are really great, and You know, I always think about when I was a kid, we knew that sex was around, we knew that drugs was out there somewhere, but they were always out there somewhere.
yeah.
They weren't in our immediate world.
Yeah, not approaching us.
Yeah.
On that note, we got to take a short break. We'll be right back.
Aloha from Pacific Source, and thank you for your support over the years. Pacific Source has offered more of what builders and homeowners value most in building materials and cabinet design. We've done this by offering superior customer service and products, as well as by designing kitchens and baths that are intelligent and elegant while staying true to your vision and budget. Visit our showroom in Waikapu in central Maui, where we display a variety of cabinets as well as top-name appliances like Sub-Zero, Wolf, Viking, KitchenAid, and more. We display countertops, tile and wood flooring, and several brands of windows and doors, including Fleetwood multi-slides and La Cantina folding doors. Come in and talk to our designers about making your dreams become a reality. From concept to completion, we really believe our attention to detail and superior service are what sets us apart. Let us show you what we mean. We are a Pacific Source at 515 East Oahe Way in the Consolidated Base Yard in Waikapu, just off Waiko Road. Call us at 986-0380. That's 986-0380, or look us up online at packsource.com.
And we're back. This is Maui Nonprofit Notes, the weekly radio show where we talk story with our executive directors and their staff to find out what is happening in our community, because they have their finger on the pulse of what's going on. And Danny Riggs is with us. He's a clinical director at Child and Family Services Maui. And some of the things, I guess, when you come in, I get my eyes opened. You know, it's like, Susie, you're not living in the real world. You know, because I don't. I just, the things we do at our agency, you know, aren't this kind of activities. Although it's going on, we know it's out there. And it's just, I guess the scope of it is what gets me. We're talking pre-kindergarten.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the sad, hopeful things of my average day at work is I will watch some young child, some keiki, walk down the hallway back to our session rooms, and I know that they have either been abused and neglected, are the victim of sexual assault. Sometimes it's intrafamilial, sometimes it's not. And so the sad part is knowing that these horrible things have happened to them. The hopeful part is that they're there,
Right.
that they're receiving help, and they're receiving help at a really early age, soon after the abuse and assault has happened. And but for so many people, they'll hold that their whole lives, you know, well into their adulthood before they're ever able to talk about it.
And mostly is it just shame, or it's just a non-subject?
It's mostly shame.
Okay.
You know, the shame, the guilt, the self-blame. I've never worked with a sexual assault victim who didn't believe that there was some place black and dark within them.
It's their fault.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Whoa. But you know, it's like as a kid, you know, you played doctor, right? And I can't, as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking, how many times did something like this really happen? And the kids just thought that was playing doctor.
Right. Yeah, a good pedophile, somebody who's really good at grooming children, really will spend their time and prepare the child and convince them that it's okay, or that if they tell that their parents will be in trouble, or they'll be taken away from their parents. There's all kinds of horrible stories that go on.
But now that's an older person doing it to a child.
Right.
What if it's another child basically the same age?
Well, we work with those kids. You know, if it's basically the same age, there's this funny little test kind of it's not little, it's actually a really big assessment that you do, where you're trying to look at whether the person who's doing the sexual assault is in fact a sexually reactive child, or whether they are a pedophile or a perpetrator. And so if it's a sexually reactive child, oftentimes that's a child who's been sexually assaulted themselves. And we'll do work with them it's a whole different type of treatment, a whole different track of treatment from if you're working with somebody who's a perpetrator. because perpetrator treatment is a very specific, unique kind of work.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So as you hear about these, especially with the young children, this could be something that's happened in somebody's home to a child and now is trying it out on somebody else.
Yes. And in fact, even in the bigger picture, most sexual assaults do happen in somebody's home. 40% happen in the person's home.
Oh my gosh. Okay, well, it's time to talk about Red Cross. No.
Sorry, you're out.
Well, another set of a different type of emergency, right?
No, it's one of those things where you sit there and I mean, you face this every day. I don't know how you do it. But I think you said earlier, it's the hope that you see with the work that you do with these people that will change them back to who they were before this happened, or better than before.
And I have a great staff.
There you go. Okay, so that's the answer. But if somebody goes to, like we have this one agency, Nakeki Oemalia,
Yes, a wonderful organization.
and Brooke, and working with the kids who have lost someone they love, whether it's a sibling or a parent or whatever. And she talks about how some people go through life with hanging on to these issues that if they'd come to their session and at some point talk them out, they'll find they're just like everybody else out there. This isn't, you're not the only one that happened to, kind of thing, or whatever. And I'm hearing the same thing coming from you, is if you keep it bottled up, it's got one of two ways to go.
Well, it's going to deeply impact and affect your life no matter what. And if you actually are able to do some work with it, then you can resolve a lot of the issues, lessen the impact, really change your life in a lot of really positive ways. If it doesn't get worked out, it will impact every aspect of your life. How do you have a relationship with somebody that's loving and trusting if your trust has been annihilated?
Right.
So,
You won't be able to see that they're true.
right.
Or be afraid of getting too close to that person or any person.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah. One of our big pushes, actually, in fact, is to begin to work more with boys and men. Because I never want to ignore our male victims, okay? But the sad fact is that the majority of sex assault occurs to women, and the majority of offenders are men. And part of what we need to do is educate our men and boys. And so we're actually working with a program called Coaching Boys to Men, and it's designed for high school coaches. And each week there's a short 15, 20-minute little lesson that's worked on with, and those are the kids that are going to be the role models for everybody else, right?
Right.
So you're going to work with the role models, and you're going to begin to teach them about anti-bullying. You're going to be able to teach them about consent. You're going to teach them about safe dating practices. You're going to teach them about being respectful in your relationships with the opposite sex. All of those sorts of things become part of just what you do when you go to practice. You put on your pads and you study this stuff, or you grab your basketball and this is part of what you do.
Right.
The guy who's teaching it for us, Stephen Vega, is a coach, and he says, I have two jobs. I have to teach X's and O's, and I have to help these boys become men. And if I only do the second one, I've done my job.
Interesting. Very true, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, it's as you said, they become the role models, especially if they are a standout athlete. Every move they make is somebody's model of how to behave.
Exactly. Yes.
And for many, many years, they could do anything they wanted and get by with it. That was kind of the feeling.
Well, and it's, our colleges are still struggling with that, protecting star athletes. I think our schools still struggle with it, although we're making, in all these areas, including the NFL and professional sports, we're making progress.
Right.
But we're making progress from nothing to very little to, okay, we're part way along the path. And we still have a ways to go, because you still pick up the paper or go on the internet and hear about some famous star who's battering their wife or their girlfriend. Or, we continue to hear these kind of stories come out. So.
That's true. And a lot of people say, oh, well, they're making so much money as a star, they've just lost touch. But that's a basic instinct. That's not a, is it? Isn't it? I mean,
Well,
tendency.
the reality, I want to defend men for a moment.
Okay.
Here, the reality is that most men don't commit sexual assault.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, my theory, this is just my own personal theory, completely unproven, is that really what we want as men is we want to be desired.
Ah.
Again, no proof. but I feel pretty strongly about it. I think we want to be desired.
Okay.
But for a perpetrator of sexual assault, they want to control.
Okay.
And oftentimes the most powerful part of the experience for them, in fact, is fantasizing about it before they do it.
So they live it twice.
Yes. Or many,
more.
or many
Yeah.
times, yes. And so it's a very conscious act for them. And it is a small minority of men who are, in fact, sexual perpetrators. But they have oftentimes many victims.
Interesting. Wow. Here we go again.
Yeah.
Okay. So
It's Wednesday, so this is what I do for work, right?
yeah, that's true. That's true. So, I mean, you work with, which it's Child and Family Services. So the majority of the people you work with is up to through high school.
No, we work with everybody. In child abuse and neglect, we'll do work with the children, but we also are going to work with the adults to have them how to be a better parent, how to not fall into those patterns, how to be less reactive, maybe if there's substance abuse involved, So we work with adults there. And in sexual assault, the reality is that we do, as you say, do a lot of work with children, but we work with teens, adults. There is even something called an AMAC.
What?
An AMAC.
Okay.
And an AMAC is an adult molested as a child.
Oh, okay.
So we work with AMACs.
Oh, somebody who's been living with it all these years.
Right. You can have somebody who's 40 or 50 years old, has never talked about it with anybody. Maybe is not talking about it with their husband. Or their best friend, people who they would consider their best friends, and they've never come forward and talked about it. And that they're actually part of the population, part of the people we work with.
I heard somebody telling a story one time about their daughter, I think it was, who started seeing a psychiatrist, and they couldn't figure out why. Seemed like a perfectly normal young adult at this point, in her mid-20s kind of thing. And she announced to her family that she had been sexually abused as a young, 13, 14-year-old. Mm-hmm. And they just kind of sat there with their chins hanging out. Why didn't we know about this? And then as she told the story, in working with the psychiatrist, she'd gotten to the point where she could talk about it. And that was one of the things I guess they suggested, is tell your family and tell them what was happening, who it was. And they're all sitting there in just total disbelief that this person could do anything like this. And then one member of the family spoke up and said, "Oh, you're just saying this. There's no way that happened."
It's the most damaging thing, other than the assault itself, that can happen to a victim. We see this all the time. If we get parents who believe, our motto is start by believing, okay?
Okay.
If we have a victim who comes in, we're going to start by believing them. But if we get parents who follow that motto, who start by believing, the progress that child is going to make is so much different when we get the really sad cases when the parents don't support the child, don't believe their uncle or their boyfriend or someone else close to them, somebody from their church maybe, could have done such a thing. And the sad thing we know for that child is that their recovery is going to be much more difficult and take much more time. So for any of us, I know you work with the Red Cross, but I'm sure that people you serve have been through sexual assault, and if your staff and your volunteers start by believing, then it's going to help. I do training for Maui Police Department, and what I tell them is, do you know when the treatment for a sex assault survivor begins?
When they first start talking to them.
When they first start talking to the police.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're part. The police are part of the treatment program as far as I'm concerned. And how that officer interacts with that victim begins to shape their whole experience of recovery.
I can see that. Yeah, if it's a negative experience, they don't want to talk about it again.
Yeah.
To anybody.
But that's true for their family, too. If they
Right.
got this young woman you mentioned who was very courageous. I really applaud her. To hear that from a family member, I've got to imagine was very devastating for her.
And I can't imagine somebody in the family, oh, no, he wouldn't do that. You just want to get attention.
Happens more often than you want to know, Susie.
Well, to me, the bottom line is, why would somebody come up with a story like this and put themselves in that position?
Well, and as you said, there's so much shame. Just to be able to talk about it is so hard. So, yeah, I think I'm going to just make up a really hard, shameful thing and talk to people about it. It's not really what happens.
Oh, boy. Danny, our time is up. I can't believe I'm going to have you on for the whole hour one of these times.
We probably should do that. You and I can yak all day. I do want to make one final invitation. Okay. Just if you're out and about on April the 5th, come by the mall in the afternoon. And if any of the sex assault services can be helpful for you, please call we have a 24-hour hotline, and it's 873-8624. We have great staff that man the hotline. They're really helpful, and we will do our best to get you the services and connect you with the people that you need to be connected with.
Great. Thank you, Danny, for all you do. As I said earlier, I can't believe it's an easy job to go to every morning.
It kind of is, actually.
Is it?
It is. Well, again, we have great
Right.
staff. We have great people we work with, really dedicated. And like all of us in this room right now, we're making a difference for our island. And that's what's really critical.
And, a lot of people say it's the masses that count, but to me, it's one person at a time.
I'm part of your school.
There you go. Okay.
All right. Thank
Danny,
you, Susie.
thank you so much, and keep up the great work over at Child and Family Services.
All right. Thank you.
Aloha.
Aloha.
Oh, Michelle Liberty, how are you?
Are you ready to talk disaster now? This is a really uplifting hour you've chosen here.
I don't know. That was pretty much of a disaster right there.
Yeah, it kind of was.
But it's, as you said, you're both kind of in the same business. You got something going on, and it needs attention.
Yeah, I think for him, though, he's dealing with what actually happened, devastating things that are happening to these people and these families, where with the Red Cross, often we're trying to make sure people are prepared so that they are in a position to help themselves if we have a disaster, and they have what they need and they're equipped mentally, emotionally to handle the disaster.
Right.
Because just being prepared helps.
Yeah.
People on their way to recovery. So
Are the people on Maui prepared for when Haleakala erupts?
I would say not.
Oh,
Are
okay.
you?
All right. You don't think it's going to happen in the next 3, 4, 5 years?
I don't know. My crystal ball is broken. I can't tell you that.
Well, every time we get a rumble, like we had the one a few weeks ago from the Big Island earthquake, and then just last week, we had the Molokai. Wasn't it just off Molokai that there was an earthquake? It's like, people go, my gosh, that's 2 in, so quick time. And then there was one theory that came out, and I can't remember where I read it, but that the Molokai one was the bending of the floor, because of the weight of the islands. And it's like, whenever they talk about the weight of the islands, I look and go, oh, there's a new building going up there, there's a new building going up there, there's another road going in here. How much more cement can we pour on this poor little chunk of dirt out here without bending that, what is that called? Jack, you must know. Huh?
It's the shelf.
The shelf.
Yeah.
There we go. Works for me.
Okay.
And so it's coming. But you've got more real disasters in front of you before
we do,
that.
and just looking at Big Island, I mean, that may be true. What you're saying may be true. I don't know.
I don't either.
I know that for Big Island, I lived there for 10 years, and we were used to the smaller earthquakes, and we always just thought of it as it's releasing pressure and for as far as the volcanic action goes, and better to release a little bit of pressure than unleash a lot of it, like has also happened. So,
Right.
We'd be like, oh, okay, it's an earthquake, not a huge deal, but
That's
the
a good
one,
point.
I think what was it, 2006, when we had the 6.7 over on the Big Island. I was living there for that, and that was absolutely terrifying.
That was the one that damaged all the churches and the older structures of the North Shore. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that was.
So
that
I'll
was
take the
pretty
little
bad.
ones, but those big ones, those are nothing to play with.
That's true. That's true. And I know they keep saying that it's not dormant, Haleakala, because it hasn't been quiet for however many years it has to be
Right.
called
And
dormant.
I think they're saying the same thing about the Big Island volcanoes as well. So we live among volcanoes. We just do. Yeah.
That's true.
Right.
That's true. It's a fact of life.
It is.
That's part of the fun of living in Hawaii. Did you say we need a break?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Jack wants us to take a break. We'll do that right now, and we'll be back with Michelle Liberty of the Red Cross.
Aloha from Pacific Source, and thank you for your support over the years. Pacific Source has offered more of what builders and homeowners value most in building materials and cabinet design. We've done this by offering superior customer service and products, as well as by designing kitchens and baths that are intelligent and elegant while staying true to your vision and budget. Visit our showroom in Waikapu in central Maui, where we display a variety of cabinets as well as top-name appliances like Sub-Zero, Wolf, Viking, KitchenAid, and more. We display countertops, tile and wood flooring, and several brands of windows and doors, including Fleetwood multi-slides and La Cantina folding doors. Come in and talk to our designers about making your dreams become a reality. From concept to completion, we really believe our attention to detail and superior service are what sets us apart. Let us show you what we mean. We are a Pacific Source at 515 East Oahe Way in the Consolidated Base Yard in Waikapu, just off Waiko Road. Call us at 986-0380. That's 986-0380, or look us up online at packsource.com.
And we are back. This is Maui Nonprofit Notes, the radio show where we talk story with our Maui Nonprofit executive directors and staff to find out what they are doing in their agency to keep Maui the best it can be. And preparing us for disasters. For us, we mostly think of fires, floods,
Hurricanes,
hurricanes.
tsunamis.
Oh, okay.
There's a whole list.
I got you. We have the whole list. But the most recently, it's been fires and floods, pretty much.
Yeah, last year, along about August, September, what we call the heart of hurricane season, we did have several storms that were threatening Maui directly,
Right.
coming right for us, and we luckily were
Yeah.
spared.
It was like almost every other week there was one or something.
It was, and do you remember when we had the two? I think it was Lester and Madeline. That
Oh, yeah.
One was going north of the island, and one ended up going south. But the one that one of those was just not that far offshore, maybe about 50 miles from what I understand. And if that thing had wobbled, it may have been a whole nother picture.
Right.
We watched Hurricane Matthew on the east coast of the United States make its way up the coastline, and we sent responders from Hawaii as well out there to help reinforce volunteer support on the mainland. And we had people originally fly into Orlando, then we had people going into Georgia, we had them going
all the way
into
up.
South Carolina, and then along about North Carolina. Up until that point the storm had run pretty much alongside like these storms did with Hawaii, and then just one little wobble and North Carolina got knocked. I actually ended up going out there the end of October, beginning of November for a couple of weeks to help with that response. And they still have people working on that response.
Wow.
So I'm very thankful that we didn't get hit during hurricane season, because it's going to be a long haul to recovery if that day ever comes or when it comes.
Yeah. It's interesting. It used to be that we'd hear about these things on a continuing basis. Like the storm in North Carolina, if it's not all cleaned up by now, which is 6 months later, what's wrong? What's happening? What is it? Somebody's fault? What's going on? But with all the news media and all the cycles of news there is, our weather doesn't seem to stay in the news very much.
It really doesn't stay in the news very much. And then if you look at the weather, things that happen, say, in Haiti or in some of the other outer islands off the East Coast, they get even less mentioned through the media. But yeah, that's just the way it works.
Interesting.
It's an election year.
Yeah, we know what took up most of their time. We got it. But it's to me, it's interesting that like you say, it was just last fall that we had all those storms facing us. And there was one that somebody jokingly said, and I don't know that there's any basis in truth of this, but that it was headed straight up through the Big Island and the mountains range there. Between the two mountains, split it apart. And so we ended up getting nothing. If it had come just one side or the other of either of those mountains, we might have had a full-on situation.
Entirely possible.
Yeah. So I guess we can put up with a little bit of fog.
Maui is pretty well protected. I mean, if you look at the way the islands are arranged, we are fairly well protected, but I don't want to count on that.
Right.
And I know that our volunteers don't want to count on that.
Right.
We don't want something to happen. Of course we don't. But what we do want is to be ready and to have a community or communities throughout the islands that are ready to take it on if that's what we're being faced with.
Right. Is it hard to keep a group of volunteers prepared when there's a lack of activity?
Of course.
Or yeah, because
it
they
creates
volunteer to do something.
complacency,
Yeah.
right. And something else will take more time and attention. We do spend a lot of time with the disaster preparedness side, doing what we call community disaster education, talking with adults, talking with kids, talking with families. What should you have on hand in the event of an emergency? If that earthquake that you're describing, if that happens and it disrupts our water, it may be some time before we get water here. That's just a fact. Or electricity, or any number of infrastructure disruptions that could happen. And how do we make sure that you're not going to spin into a panic? And part of what will help you is if you have the basic things that you need to survive. We have a campaign going on now. It's called the Pillowcase Project. I think we've talked about this before, and I know you're laughing. It's always something. But what this goes back to the Hurricane Katrina days back in New Orleans when the levees failed. And there was a group of college students that needed to evacuate with just a moment's notice. And when they realized it was time to go, they needed to go out for their own safety. They grabbed their pillowcases and they put some of their personal items in the pillowcase to just get on out the door with them. And somehow Walt Disney got a hold of this, along with Red Cross, developed a partnership and created this campaign that we have now called the Disney Pillowcase Project. And what we're doing is we're reaching out to groups of our kids between the ages of 8 and 11, and we're going in to speak in front of these groups about disaster, about emergencies that can happen. We're talking a little bit about the science involved, just touching on that, the science of a hurricane or the science, behind a wildfire and how it spreads. We're talking with them about coping skills, how to get through it, how to make yourself feel better, how to stay calm so that you can deal with the situation that's in front of you. And what kind of items do you need to have in that disaster kit? Things like a flashlight, water. We want people to have a gallon of water per person per day. Can opener, non-perishable foods. I remember when Iselle hit the Big Island, there was a big community outcry for ice. Hey, we may not have ice if and when that disaster occurs. So maybe think of ways you can store things on hand that aren't going to require you to have ice. Right. Things along those lines. So we're reaching out, and we're going to be getting in front of groups of kids and just talking through this. And then they also get a pillowcase that's kind of outlined like a coloring book with has Mickey Mouse and stuff on it too. But it has the disaster preparedness, some of the information, and they get to design their own pillowcase.
Cool.
They've got fabric markers, and we've grown a pool of about 16, 17 volunteers at this point that are right now in the process of education, learning to be presenters, to get out and do this project. So certainly there's no charge for this, and if anybody has a group of kids, whether it's a church or another Boys and Girls Club, anything along those lines, give us a call. Call us at the office, the number 0051, can hit extension 0, and just leave a message, and either I'll get back with you or one of our volunteers will, and we can work to schedule this. The presentations are about 60 to 90 minutes, including the time the kids get to color and design their pillowcase.
Cool. We were, excuse me, one of the times, sometimes you go outside and all the neighbors are out doing something and chatting and this and that, and you sit down, and I sat down with a couple of the kids from the neighborhood, and these kids are from, say, 6 years old to 10 years old, right? And I think it was one of the days right after we'd had one of those little bumps, if you will, from the earthquakes, and I just said something about, did you feel it this morning or yesterday, whatever it was? Yeah. And a couple of them said, no, I didn't feel a thing. And I said, you realize what those are, yeah? And so we got talking about them and how one of the first things you think about is you lose power, you lose, maybe water, and so on, and kind of go down the list. And this one kid pops up and he says, but I can tell you what's going on whenever nobody else can. And I said, what do you mean, what's going on? Oh, what the rest of the world and here, what's happening? I got my iPad. And I was sitting there going, this kid thinks he's going to use his iPad when there's no power, no nothing out there. How's he going to hook that up?
Yeah, that could be a problem. If we have cell towers and if we have Wi-Fi, having an extra, the external batteries that you can buy to power up your iPad or your iPhone, those things can help. But when there's no cell signal at all, or when landlines are down, we're going to have to go back to that pass a note through horse and buggy kind of communication.
He was so convinced he could save everybody and know what's happening next and all this, and I'm going, really?
Yeah.
So I just thought I'd throw that
Good
out
for
there
him.
because some of the kids are on top of it, and some of it think they've got the world whipped.
Right.
But that was kind of an interesting discussion with those kids. I love the pillowcase program.
I remember being with my granddaughter. My granddaughter lives in California, and people on the news, they were all talking about the big ones coming. There's going to be this big earthquake. There's a 80%, 90%, whatever it was that day, chance of this happening. And I watched her become very frightened, hearing this news. And she had a lot of questions, and she wanted to talk about things, and we did. And I just needed at one point to tell her, this isn't to frighten you. This is to prepare you. This is so that you'll have taken some time to put together the items that you and your family need. So if something does happen, or when something does happen, at least you have those basic things that you need. At least you're educated and you know what to do next. So again, it's not meant to scare anybody. And that story that we all hear when we're little, the sky is falling, and sometimes I feel like that's me. But someday it might fall, and we all want to be ready to do what we can when it does.
Right. So Red Cross on Maui, are you very visible, do you think?
That's an interesting question. Red Cross probably isn't very visible. I was talking with you earlier about this, and the volunteers that we work with, they are not the look at me now type of people. They're not seeking the glory. They're not up, typically in front of everybody announcing that they just went and helped a family whose house burned down in the night. The volunteers have the heart for what we do. They don't do it to be self-serving, honestly. They do it to be helping those that really honestly need that help, whether it's a house fire, or an area that's been evacuated due to flooding, or people that can't get home or to where they need to be because there's a brush fire, a landslide, any number of things. So really, like you asked before, keeping them engaged during times when we don't have those disasters, that can be challenging. They don't want to come and just camp out in a Parks and Rec facility waiting for a hurricane, but if the hurricane hits, they want to be right there to make sure that they're helping the people of our community that need that help.
Right. Do people who have been helped by the Red Cross tend to volunteer later on?
Many of them do tend to volunteer beyond that. One of our good volunteers, her name is Aloha Smith. She lives out in Kaupo, and she came to the Red Cross by way of a house fire personally. And then, once she got through her recovery, she said, hey, I want to be there for others. Not everybody is equipped physically, emotionally, whatever it is, to be a volunteer. Others work with us in different ways. In our community, we have an awful lot of partner agencies, other nonprofit organizations that are even our group in Maui that support a disaster response, whether it's by providing food, by helping to transport supplies, by letting us use flatbeds, vans, trucks, maybe manpower, drivers when we're out doing disaster assessment, following something. So there's something a lot of people can do, donors, supporters, and partners, in addition to our volunteers.
And volunteers come in all ages, shapes, sizes?
Typically, our volunteers are going to be over 18 years old. On Oahu, they have kids clubs. I'd love to see that happen here someday, but it's going to take adults that want to lead the kid clubs to make that happen. Again, I'm the only staff person for the island of Maui for the American Red Cross. Everything that we do is with volunteers, and so I personally have to make sure that we can accomplish what we set out to do and be there for those disasters. Yeah.
That's a challenge.
It can be a challenge.
Ah,
Yes.
wow. And when we don't have disasters going on, sometimes you do send people to other areas, like you mentioned, North Carolina.
It's true, we do. We do that for a couple of reasons. We do that because our volunteers want to help, but we also do it because that's what gives them direct exposure and experience to be able to bring on back to Maui or to the state of Hawaii, so that we are better equipped to help should something happen. But another reason I'm here is that it is Red Cross Month. The month of March is Red Cross Month across the country. We celebrated last weekend our Maui volunteers. The weekend before that, our heroes throughout the state that are with the Red Cross. Our hero, our Maui County Volunteer of the Year, her name is Elaine Olson. She leads our staffing team, so as we get our volunteers placed positions, assigned out there when something happens, it's largely due to her efforts. But these guys are incredible. It's a great group to work with.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you so much for being with us, Michelle. And we'll stay tuned with that pillowcase project.
Sounds good. Thanks, Susan.
The phone number for more information, 244-0051.
Extension 0.
Extension 0. Very good.
Thank
Thank
you,
you. Thank you so much. Maui Nonprofit Notes is sponsored as a community service by Pacific Source, the builder's choice. Give Paul and his staff a call at 986-0380 or stop by their showroom in the Waikapu Bayshard on East Oahe Way to see how they can help you with your building project. The Maui Nonprofit Directors Association's mission is to provide personal and professional support to nonprofit executive directors, their organizations, and the community of Maui. Please visit our website at mauinonprofit.org for a list of member agencies. If you see one listed there that you'd like to find out more about, please go to their website and check them out. Today we visited with Danny Riggs, the Clinical Director for Child and Family Services Maui, and with Michelle Liberty, who's the Maui County Director for the American Red Cross here. And got an update on what's happening with them and what's going on in the months of March and April. We want to thank everybody for tuning in. Don't forget to join us again next week right here on Wednesday at noon on KAOI Radio, 1110 AM, 96.7 FM, 96.5 FM on the west side, and now 98.7 in upcountry. Next week we'll feature representatives of 2 other member agencies of the Maui Nonprofit Directors Association. And I just want to repeat those phone numbers one more time for you. For the Red Cross, 244-0051, and for Child and Family Services, you're looking at the 24-hour hotline is 873-8624, or for general information from their office at 877-6888. Thanks for joining us. My name is Susie Tiemann, Executive Director of Lokahi Pacific, and your host. Everybody have a great week. Aloha.